Luo Ning woke inside another world with one noble bloodline, one lethal scandal, and almost no time to understand either. Before sunset, his new family would decide whether he remained in Heir, became an exile, or disappeared beneath noble politics. Minutes earlier, he had been a game designer finishing another exhausting night of overtime on Earth. Then his old life ended, and the memories of a spoiled young noble flooded into his mind. His new body belonged to Luo Ning Wushan, eldest grandson of a powerful Marcus family in the kingdom of Alduin. That inheritance sounded perfect until the dead young man's reputation surfaced beside it. The former Luo Ning had no battle aura, no magic, and almost no accomplishment beyond banquets and pleasure. 2 nights earlier, a private scandal had pushed that useless reputation into political catastrophe. After a banquet, he entered a room with Selena Hyde and woke to accusations that could destroy his future. Selena killed herself the next day and left a letter placing the blame on Luo Ning. Her death mattered because Selena was the youngest granddaughter of Border Earl Ulsan Hyde. The Hyde family guarded an unstable frontier and possessed enough strength to make Wushan depend on their cooperation. One dead young woman had therefore become a political weapon capable of shaking an entire marquisate. The disaster grew worse because another Hyde grandchild had died during Wiggins Wushan's recent military campaign. Slant Hyde had fallen in battle after poor command decisions and an unnecessary charge. Those 2 deaths now pointed toward the same household and demanded political payment. How much could 2 deaths cost once powerful nobles began calculating territory instead of mourning privately? He would learn the answer inside Wushan Fortress before he had even learned how this body truly worked. His father Wiggins had already contributed to the nightmare through one furious mistake. After hearing Selena's accusation, the high-ranking knight punched his son hard enough to kill the original owner. Wiggins intended punishment, yet supernatural strength turned a father's anger into the doorway for another soul. Now the transmigrator walked toward the fortress under guard, while escape routes quietly disappeared around him. Running would only look like confession, and this weak body could never outrun trained soldiers anyway. The manor around him displayed fountains, gardens, polished stone, and enough luxury to feed ordinary villages for years. None of that wealth mattered if the meeting ahead ended with Luo Ning offered as compensation. Wushan Fortress rose above the estate like a white stone judgment waiting at the top of the hill. Its massive gate opened onto a hall cleared of servants, witnesses, and anyone likely to repeat dangerous conversations. Before he crossed those gates, translucent text finally flickered across the edge of Luo Ning's vision. A hidden system existed, but the message attached one brutal condition to its activation. He needed to obtain a noble title first. His inheritance rights did not count as a usable title, and his expected barony remained nearly a year away. What good was a miracle locked behind the political status he was about to lose? The guards stopped at the fortress entrance and ordered Luo Ning to continue alone. At the far end waited 5 men capable of deciding whether his second life lasted another hour. Rulan's Wushan sat above them, old, thin, and still terrifying despite decades of injury and illness. The founder of Wushan territory remained a meteor knight whose reputation restrained ambitious vassals across the region. Beside him stood Wiggins, broad-shouldered, thick-bearded, and already furious before his son approached. 3 armored representatives of House Hyde waited opposite them with open hostility. Beyond that gate, a long hall had been cleared of servants and casual witnesses. Luo Ning entered a room where nearly everyone could kill him before he managed another useful thought. Wiggins roared for him to kneel, and survival defeated pride without much argument. Negan immediately dismissed the family performance and demanded satisfaction for Selena's death. Another Hyde knight added Slant's battlefield death, making the grievance much larger than one scandal. Wiggins normally answered pressure by becoming louder than everyone around him. This time, his failed command left him with nowhere intelligent to direct that anger. So his glare returned to Luo Ning, the easiest target inside the hall. For one long moment, the room belonged to people measuring which tragedy could purchase which concession. Luo Ning kept his eyes lowered and watched the only person whose decision actually mattered. Rulans finally spoke about Slant first, praising the dead young Barren's courage and expressing regret. Negan accepted the courtesy, then pressed harder on Selena's death and demanded punishment. Rulans drew one boundary immediately and refused to exchange Luo Ning's life for hers. Selena had died by suicide, he said, so the grandson would not repay her death with execution. That ruling loosened the pressure behind Luo Ning's ribs by only one narrow degree. His life survived the first decision, but his future waited beneath the next one. Rulans admitted House Wushan still owed Hyde a serious answer for both losses. Then the old Marquis offered something more valuable than another corpse on the fortress floor. Britain Wushan would become the future third-generation heir of Wushan territory. Britain was Wiggins's younger son by Diane Hyde, making Ulsan Hyde the boy's maternal great-grandfather. That single succession choice gave House Hyde a permanent interest in supporting Wushan's next generation. Then Rulans turned the same bargain toward the grandson still kneeling below him. Luoning Wuxian was stripped of every legal right to inherit the marquisate after his father. His future did not survive the next sentence nearly as cleanly. Negan's reaction told Luoning why the demand for blood suddenly became less important. Hyde no longer needed his death when Britain's succession offered influence worth far more than simple revenge. For one long moment Luoning rearranged every part of Celaena's death inside his head. Celaena died, Hyde arrived furious, and Britain benefited from the exact political settlement they received. Was her suicide always meant to clear Britain's path, or had someone exploited a perfect disaster afterward? The darker answer remained unproven, but Luoning stored the timing beside every other danger around him. Whatever the truth, staying near the center of this succession struggle looked increasingly suicidal. The Hyde representatives moved into compensation talks while nobody bothered addressing Luoning again. His knees went numb as nobles bargained over losses capable of reshaping Wuxian politics for years. Eventually the three Hyde knights departed with enough concessions to leave them visibly satisfied. Wiggins waited until the doors closed before throwing a crystal cup near his eldest son's knees. He blamed Luoning for the family's losses while carefully ignoring his own disastrous battlefield decisions. Rulans answered by asking whether Wiggins had measured enemy strength before launching that campaign. The old Marquis also reminded him that Slant handled logistics and should never have led that reckless charge. Then Rulans asked whether his son's head contained anything more useful than horse manure. Meanwhile, Hyde representatives moved into compensation talks while nobody bothered speaking to Luoning again. After the room settled, Rulans unexpectedly asked Luoning what he believed had happened around Celaena. A foolish answer would confirm every insult attached to the disgraced former heir. A brilliant answer could reveal that someone entirely different now occupied Luoning's face. So Luoning aimed between those dangers and called the scandal a deliberate conspiracy. Celaena had supposedly cared for him, making her immediate suicide after the banquet deeply suspicious. Someone could have manipulated events, killed her, or used the accusation to split Wuxian from Hyde. Rulans watched his grandson after hearing reasoning the old Luoning rarely displayed. The theory remained simple enough to fit his reputation while proving he could finally think beyond pleasure. Rulans told him to stand and admitted the possibility deserved consideration. Then the old Marquis explained the succession choice with politics instead of pretending affection decided everything. Britain had already awakened a fighting spirit seed while still young and looked far more promising than his brother. Britain also carried Hyde's support, something the weakening Wuxian succession desperately needed before Rulans died. The old Marquis could preserve the Wuxian name by letting the stronger political bridge inherit. Luoning had therefore escaped death partly because the succession no longer required him. And then Rulans offered him the safest version of his reduced future. He could remain inside Wuxian Fortress, avoid responsibility, and spend the rest of his life comfortably supported. That retirement might have pleased someone older, weaker, and completely unaware of a locked system. Luoning had just received another life and possessed a miracle demanding a real title. He refused to spend either advantage eating quietly inside somebody else's castle. So he told Rulans he wanted to work instead. Wiggins immediately asked whether the family had failed to feed him enough already. Luoning ignored the provocation and performed the apology his position required. He blamed his foolish past for forcing the family to pay and said he wanted to make amends. Then he asked for something deliberately modest. Give him one remote town, even a poor one, and let him earn instead of consuming family resources. Wiggins nearly laughed at the idea that this pleasure-seeking son could manage anything useful. Rulans reacted differently, because even a failed experiment would cost the family very little. If Luoning succeeded, another branch of Wuxian blood would remain useful outside the main succession. Rulans told Wiggins to choose a remote settlement and allow the disgraced grandson to prove himself. Wiggins protested that soldiers from the recent campaign had not even received all their rewards yet. Rulans reminded him that the old Marquis himself probably had only a few years remaining. That sentence quieted the argument more effectively than another insult ever could. A meteor knight should have lived far longer, but an old wound had consumed Rulans for decades. Wiggins finally surrendered and named Shanlin Town for Luoning's new barony. The place meant almost nothing inside inherited memories, which made the offer suspiciously convenient. Rulans considered the choice briefly, then allowed it. The moment the barony became official, glowing text shifted across Luoning's waiting interface. His title had registered, and the system finally began activating. The exile that looked worthless to everyone else had opened the only door Luoning truly needed. Rulans left the hall with Luoning supporting one arm, earning a remark that the boy seemed more considerate. The old man privately regretted that this change had arrived after the succession decision. Luoning did not waste time mourning an inheritance he had never personally possessed. 5 familiar interfaces were waiting when he returned to his room. Wiggins finally surrendered the argument and named Shanlin Town as the destination. The former game designer recognized every retention mechanic because he had once helped design them himself. His old profession had followed him through death and somehow become supernatural infrastructure. Was there any stranger punishment for a game designer than living inside his own monetization plan? Monthly sign-in gave ordinary attribute points and a larger reward every 7th day. Higher noble rank multiplied those rewards, making titles valuable for far more than political prestige. The 7-day login track offered immediate tools for surviving a dangerous new territory. Its first reward was a knight with the potential to reach gold rank. Another reward promised a spatial ring with 10 cubic meters of storage. Later days offered the flowing flame sword and a magical beast contract scroll. The final login day promised a light mage with the potential to reach archmage. Luo Ning cursed his former professional self for not making new player rewards even more absurdly generous. Then the first recharge page punished him with another familiar piece of game design. 6 magic crystals would summon a fire knight possessing blazing sun potential and include a deluxe gift package. 1 magic crystal cost roughly 100 gold coins in this world. Luo Ning's personal drawer contained only 23 gold coins from his old allowance. The strongest early reward therefore cost far more cash than he could possibly produce today. His own design had transformed a miracle into a premium package priced beyond a disgraced Barren's savings. Fortunately, the achievement interface offered growth without requiring immediate payment. Becoming a Viscount promised major attribute points and energy essence. Personally killing an enemy could reward him, while reaching 3,000 residents created another milestone. Owning a city offered even larger progress, and receiving 500 gold coins unlocked another economic achievement. Every objective pointed in the same direction: grow stronger, richer, larger, and increasingly difficult to remove. The attribute panel delivered the most personal surprise of all. Luo Ning possessed a dual path allowing battle aura and magic to develop together. His elemental affinities were superior in both wind and fire. His current body remained mortal, but a plus sign waited beside the progress bar. 1 sign-in point was already available for use. For someone whose predecessor had never awakened anything, that little symbol was worth more than fortress luxury. His personal drawer contained only 23 gold coins when he checked it. Luo Ning unfolded a rough map and found his territory at the far northern edge of Wushan lands. Mountains surrounded the region, roads were poor, and civilization thinned quickly beyond the southern approach. At first that isolation looked almost perfect for quietly developing a hidden system. Then Hallwald arrived with the appointment letter and several details that made the map much less comforting. Wiggins wanted Luo Ning gone within 2 days. Even the appointment left the Wushan surname blank, allowing the departing noble to choose a new family name. Luo Ning wrote Firestorm into the space and watched the fresh ink settle across the parchment. Wind fed flame, flame rode wind, and the new surname suited the life he intended to build. Hallwald approved politely before answering questions about Shanlin itself. The town bordered the western edge of the Wushan Monster Mountain Range and vast northern forests. Forests and hills enclosed the region east and north, leaving the southern route as its reliable connection outward. Winter could drive hungry magical beasts down from the mountains toward the isolated settlements. Previous barons and pioneer knights had died fighting those creatures. Then Hallwald mentioned the human danger beyond the forests. Remnants of a defeated force had fled north more than 20 years earlier after losing to Wushan armies. Bandits, thieves, and refugees joined them over time, forming the groups now called savage tribes. Shanlin had survived those tribes for years, suggesting their true strength remained limited rather than overwhelming. Limited still sounded dangerous for a new baron with no professional escort and almost no dependable servants. Luo Ning asked what guards, money, horses, and supplies Wiggins had assigned him. Hallwald had almost nothing encouraging to report yet. A dangerous barony had become Luo Ning's property without any meaningful package for actually surviving there. Apparently the family welcome included monsters, isolation, bad roads, and whatever hunger added afterward. Luo Ning stared at Hallwald and decided his father could pay for every piece of that inconvenience. The new baron's first problem was painfully ordinary despite all the supernatural power surrounding him. He needed money before winter, monsters, bandits, or family neglect solved his future permanently. Luo Ning went directly to Rulands because shameless requests worked better when aimed at the one relative still feeling nostalgic. The old Marquis was resting in bed when his newly disinherited grandson arrived with careful concern and obvious purpose. Luo Ning admitted Shanlin sounded poor and dangerous, yet insisted those problems would not make him retreat. He only asked whether his grandfather preferred sending him north with resources or with nothing beyond noble blood. Rulands initially said household troop allocations belonged to Wiggins now, not to an old man who had retired from daily rule. Luo Ning answered by mentioning the childhood lessons Rulans had personally given him. Reading, writing, and hunting became emotional leverage inside the same room where family politics usually outweighed sentiment. Then Luo Ning invoked his dead mother Fatima and offered to treat any support as a loan. Pride was expensive, while a remote barony without food or guards was simply dangerous. Rulans finally ordered 100 gold coins given in his own name before Luo Ning departed. He also told Wiggins to provide food, guards, horses, and the ordinary support owed to a departing son. One conversation had turned family nostalgia into startup capital for a territory everyone expected to fail. Luo Ning thanked his grandfather and left before the old man could reconsider the size of that generosity. Elsewhere, Wiggins reacted with the maturity everyone around him had learned to expect from the future Marquis. He refused to waste another grain or soldier on the son he believed had already cost Wushan too much. Diane Hyde unexpectedly told him to obey Rulans instead of feeding the argument. Whatever happened between their families, Luo Ning still carried Wushan blood and remained her husband's eldest son. Hallwald then delivered the line Luo Ning had prepared about his dead mother Fatima Sari. Wiggins went quiet long enough for everyone nearby to notice the change. He had once promised his first wife that he would protect their children with everything he possessed. Diane calmly reminded him of that promise rather than turning the dead woman into another household rivalry. Wiggins complained, drank, and finally ordered Hallwald to prepare support for the departing Barren. Under torchlight, the package looked impressive until Luo Ning inspected what his father had actually chosen. One fine warhorse stood beside 6 wagons and several ordinary horses loaded with basic supplies. The wagons carried barley, wheat, flour, dried meat, salt, cookware, and enough necessities to begin the journey. 10 men came with the convoy, although 9 supposed elite guards looked suspiciously like unwanted barracks problems. They carried cheap swords without proper armor and showed little enthusiasm about following Luo Ning anywhere. Hallwald valued the fine warhorse at around 100 gold coins by itself. Diane added another 50 gold coins from her own funds, raising Luo Ning's cash reserve beyond expectation. Why would the stepmother supporting Breton's inheritance voluntarily strengthen the brother her son had just replaced? From Diane's perspective, a powerless baron in dangerous Shanlin probably looked too distant to threaten Breton at all. Luo Ning accepted the money because suspicious intentions never made good gold less useful. Among the servants, one man immediately looked different from the reluctant guards. Chahar had volunteered for the assignment instead of being forced into remote service as punishment. His father had been a professional knight, which once gave Chahar access to education and aristocratic etiquette. After that protection disappeared, the young man entered fortress service and dreamed of becoming a proper steward someday. Luo Ning promised that meaningful work in Shanlin could carry him farther than quiet service inside a crowded fortress. Chahar answered with exactly the kind of loyalty Luo Ning desperately needed to begin collecting. That night, the 9 assigned guards held a very different conversation inside their shared quarters. None had volunteered for the Northern Road, and every rumor about Shanlin sounded like another method of dying early. They imagined magical beasts, savage tribes' hunger, and a disgraced lord abandoned by his own father. Then somebody remembered the heavy bag of gold Hallwald had handed Luo Ning in full view of the group. Fear started negotiating with greed before the fortress lamps burned low. Their ringleader proposed abandoning Luo Ning on the road and escaping with money, horses, and supplies. Another man warned that betraying a noble meant death if anyone connected them to the crime. The ringleader answered by describing the empty northern roads beyond Wushan City's immediate protection. Remote forests offered few witnesses, and dead nobles could not identify who robbed them. A pile of gold large enough to transform several poor lives suddenly made treason sound survivable. By midnight, frightened guards had become conspirators while the man they planned to kill remained awake nearby. Their doomed assignment had quietly become the escape fund they intended to steal. Luo Ning, meanwhile, waited for the system refresh like the most committed victim of his own game design. Midnight delivered another daily sign-in point and unlocked the second reward from the 7-day login track. The classic gift package contained 30 attribute points and 60 energy essence. That single package changed Luo Ning's physical future before the candle beside his bed had burned much lower. He invested enough attribute points to finish the mortal stage immediately. Strength spread through muscles that had been weakened by years of pleasure and almost no real training. His heartbeat settled into a stronger rhythm while the body's constant fatigue disappeared. Then the attribute panel divided into 2 supernatural professions at once. Novice Knight and Novice Mage appeared together where a useless Heir had previously possessed nothing extraordinary. Luo Ning sensed a fighting spirit seed near his heart and a magical space connected to his mind. The system had done more than repair a weak body inherited from the dead young noble. It had opened both major supernatural paths of this world at the same time. He spent the remaining points on knight progress, because immediate physical survival mattered more than elegant balance tonight. By morning, Chahar found a master who moved differently from the exhausted young man of the previous day. The servant had spent the night sitting outside Luo Ning's room in case anything was needed. That small decision impressed Luo Ning more than expensive promises from people carrying better titles. He told Chahar to keep working hard and eventually surpass ordinary castle servants completely. Soon the convoy rolled away from Wushan Fortress beneath a sky the original body had almost died before seeing again. Rulance's old steward most came to see Luo Ning off on behalf of the aging Marcus. Hallwald appeared for Diane, while Wiggins did not bother joining the people gathered near the gates. That absence was almost comforting because nobody needed to pretend the family separation contained tenderness. The convoy passed through Wushan City, and Luo Ning's modern expectations collided violently with medieval sanitation. The streets were wide enough for traffic and crowded enough to prove the city's importance. They were also covered with human and animal waste in ways Luo Ning had never imagined accepting as normal. He asked why the fortress allowed such filth to spread through its most important city. Chahar answered with genuine confusion and asked why the fortress would involve itself in street cleanliness. That response stayed with Luo Ning longer than the smell itself. Nobles collected taxes, commoners kept surviving, and almost nobody connected lordship with improving ordinary daily life. If Wushan City looked this bad, what exactly waited inside a forgotten settlement near Monster Mountains? The convoy left the city and entered emptier roads bordered by increasingly dense forest. Luo Ning ordered a rest so the horses could feed and everyone could prepare lunch. Then he moved toward the trees, planning to claim the first character reward where nobody could see the summoning. Chahar's shout stopped him before the interface fully opened. The 9 guards had drawn their swords and were advancing toward the master they were supposed to protect. Their leader demanded money in exchange for abandoning the journey rather than dying in Shanlin. Chahar called the act betrayal and reached for a dagger even while fear shook his hands. Luo Ning asked whether the guards intended to kill him after taking the gold. The ringleader's answer removed any doubt about how far their greed had already traveled. Wiggins had sent Luo Ning away with money but no professional knight, making the disgraced Heir easy prey. That explanation produced a strange wave of relief inside the intended victim. His father was negligent, spiteful, and disastrously cheap, but apparently not hiring assassins against his own son. For one long moment, Luo Ning watched ordinary guards transform fear and greed into open treason. Then their leader ordered everyone forward before hesitation could infect the plan. Chahar moved between steel and his master despite lacking enough strength to stop even one attacker. His knees nearly failed, but Luo Ning saw the choice before the servant stumbled. Loyalty looked suicidal, and Chahar still moved toward danger instead of toward the wagons and money. Luo Ning turned and sprinted into the woods with speed the conspirators never expected from a supposed weakling. Branches scraped his sleeves while boots crashed through undergrowth only seconds behind him. A low slope blocked the guard's view long enough for Luo Ning to open the login interface. He claimed the first reward immediately because ceremony had become a luxury reserved for people not being chased. Light carved a summoning formation across the forest floor while angry voices closed from behind. A broad-shouldered blond man emerged wearing leather armor, a shield, and a knight's sword. McCann Sullington knelt and greeted Luo Ning as his master with complete loyalty already written into his posture. Wonderful entrance, terrible timing. Luo Ning told him introductions could wait until nobody was trying to murder them. The traitors burst into the clearing and stopped when they saw a knight who had not existed moments earlier. McCann stood, drew steel and placed himself between Luo Ning and 9 men committed to killing him. His system panel showed junior knight's strength, earth affinity and progress Luo Ning could improve directly. Luo Ning poured all available energy essence into McCann before the first blade reached striking distance. New strength tightened through the summoned knight's body while the attackers forced themselves forward. Then the 9 guards charged, because retreat suddenly looked nearly as dangerous as finishing their betrayal. What followed lasted far less time than the conspiracy they had planned during the previous night. McCann caught the first sword on his shield and drove his own blade through the attacker's chest. A second man rushed his side and took a kick that folded him into the leaves. McCann pivoted before that body landed and opened another attacker's throat with one clean returning cut. Steel flashed again, and another conspirator collapsed before the group understood how badly they had miscalculated. Bodies struck the forest floor while the survivors finally remembered the fear they had tried replacing with greed. Their weapons dropped, turning a murder squad into kneeling prisoners before Chahar reached the clearing. Blood ran between exposed roots while McCann simply waited instead of chasing anyone who had surrendered. That became Luo Ning's first clear lesson about ordinary soldiers confronting a real professional knight. Char stumbled through the brush, saw the bodies and almost lost his footing a second time. Luoning praised him because courage mattered most when courage had almost no chance of succeeding. Then he approached the guard who had designed the betrayal in the first place. The ringleader pressed his forehead into dirt and blamed fear, Shanlin, and the temptation of gold. Luoning asked whether knowing McCann existed would have prevented the man from betraying them. The man's silence answered more clearly than another desperate apology. Then Luoning revealed one final detail their stolen assumptions had missed. The supposedly helpless noble they planned to rob had already become a novice knight himself. Luoning raised his sword and discovered killing felt nothing like selecting an attack inside a game interface. The ringleader looked upward once, and terror erased the confidence he carried earlier beside the road. Steel entered flesh with ugly resistance, forcing Luoning's hands onward after instinct wanted them back. Warm blood touched his fingers before the dying man collapsed against the forest floor. Chahar went still behind him while McCann watched without offering judgment or praise. For several seconds, Luoning heard leaves moving overhead more clearly than anyone breathing nearby. The dead man had planned to leave him beside this road without a grave or witness. That fact did not make the body easier to look at after Luoning became the killer standing above it. And then a system message appeared across his vision with the emotional warmth of a payment receipt. The King of Slaughter Achievement awarded attribute points and energy essence for his first deliberate kill. One human life had become measurable progress before the blood on Luoning's sword had even dried. The same interface had never looked so cold when rewards existed behind harmless glass on Earth. Luoning wiped the blade on grass and forced himself to remember who had chosen violence first. The achievement immediately changed, now asking him to personally kill a supernatural opponent next. McCann offered to execute the remaining traitors before they could become another problem later. Luoning looked toward the wagons and found one ridiculous obstacle to complete revenge. Dead men could not drive multiple separate wagons no matter how satisfying punishment might feel. So the survivors received temporary mercy and returned to gathering horse feed under McCann's eyes. Chahar hated the decision until Luoning asked whether one servant could drive the entire convoy alone. Logistics defeated immediate vengeance, but nobody kneeling there mistook survival for forgiveness. The betrayal also exposed something larger than the danger of traveling with bad guards. Servants could betray nobles whenever profit outweighed fear, and the expected punishment looked distant. What if Shanlin's long-serving officials had already forgotten that the territory belonged to someone above them? The town had gone years without a resident Barren while one political officer handled taxes and local authority. Luoning needed more loyal people before walking into a place where somebody else might consider himself owner. Buying slaves remained possible, but replacing Wiggins' defective escort with Luoning's own money felt unnecessarily generous. Wushan Fortress still owed him trustworthy guards after sending men who had almost murdered him. Why spend personal gold fixing a mistake created by his father's bad personnel choices? Luoning ordered the convoy turned around and headed straight back toward the fortress he had left that morning. Several hours later, gate guards stared as the departing Baron returned with prisoners and a completely new knight. Luoning announced that Wiggins's elite guards had attempted to murder him on the road. The surviving traitors dropped to their knees because their temporary usefulness had officially expired. Luoning went directly to Ruland's before anyone else could soften the story or control its meaning. He accused Wiggins of possibly ordering the assassination, despite already suspecting greed was the true motive. Wiggins arrived halfway through the accusation sounding ready to kill somebody for an entirely different reason. McCann stepped between father and son when the high-ranking knight advanced too aggressively. Wiggins kicked, McCann answered, and the collision drove both men backward while clearly favoring the older knight. Ruland's ordered everyone inside before the family dispute became entertainment for the surrounding fortress. Luoning described the betrayal and emphasized that Wiggins had personally chosen those 9 men. Wiggins admitted selecting troublesome guards but denied ordering anyone to murder his own son. Hallwell then revealed that Luoning's gold had been handed over openly before those same soldiers. Ruland's reconstructed the simple motive faster than his son managed another useful argument. Bad men, easy money, an isolated road, and a supposedly defenseless noble explained the attack cleanly. Luoning allowed the accusation against Wiggins to collapse exactly when continuing it stopped being profitable. Then he asked his father for replacement guards. Wiggins agreed to another small group before realizing the size of the request Luoning had prepared. Luoning asked for 100 instead. Wiggins reacted like the number itself had personally insulted several generations of his family. Ruland's rejected the demand too and pointed out that Shanlin supposedly held fewer than 1,000 residents. The old Marcus suggested 20 guards with additional supplies instead. Luoning started bargaining because the first reasonable number was almost never the final number available. By the end, shamelessness had once again produced measurable returns. He received 30 guards, more food, additional wagons, another warhorse, and another 100 gold coins. A failed assassination had become manpower, livestock, transport supplies, and cash for the second departure. Wiggins had tried sending his son away cheaply, then paid much more because his first personnel choice was terrible. The only remaining question was whether the new guards would actually choose Luoning once the road became frightening again. 30 guards were available, but Luoning wanted volunteers rather than another convoy filled with resentment. Hallwald gathered 60 castle guards across the western training field before sunset. He announced that only half could follow Barren Firestorm north toward Shanlin town. Nobody moved at first because Shanlin's reputation had reached them long before Luoning did. Remote mountains meant winter beasts, savage tribes, bad roads, and families left hundreds of miles behind. Hallwald threatened to choose by force if nobody volunteered before the sun disappeared. Luoning raised one hand and stopped him. Forced loyalty had nearly put a sword through his chest yesterday. This time he wanted every man to calculate the offer before stepping forward. He promised 1 silver coin immediately to every guard willing to follow him north. Several faces changed before a single boot moved. Then Luoning doubled their normal daily wage while keeping food and lodging included. The whispers grew louder across the training ground. He promised 1 gold coin to the family of any guard killed while serving Shanlin. Now men who had imagined only death started calculating what their families might gain from the risk. What kind of loyalty could money buy when fear had already priced the alternative? Luoning wasn't interested in pretending coin could purchase devotion forever. It could purchase a fair beginning, and fair beginnings were already rare enough in this world. Then he made the final promise that changed the crowd completely. Anyone wanting to return to Wushan City after the following year could leave without obstruction. Anyone wanting to relocate his family north would receive help arranging the journey safely. The dangerous assignment suddenly looked less like exile and more like a job with an exit door. Nearly everyone stepped forward once Luoning finished listing the terms. Hallwald stared at the crowd after threatening conscription only minutes earlier. Cash, choice, and a future had recruited faster than authority. Luoning started with the youngest applicants because age still affected their chance of awakening fighting spirit. 15 men under 18 were accepted immediately. The remaining candidates received a much less philosophical test. Run around the training ground, Luoning said, and the fastest 15 would take the remaining places. 45 men exploded forward with more enthusiasm than any drill had produced all week. Some sprinted too hard and faded halfway around the field. Others held pace, watched the runners ahead, and passed exhausted rivals near the final turn. Luoning studied stamina, rhythm, and whether men kept moving after the first burst of confidence disappeared. The 15th runner crossed before 2 competitors behind him could close the final gap. 30 guards stood together while disappointed men tried pretending they hadn't wanted the assignment anyway. Chahar brought the prepared coins and paid every selected guard before anyone left the training ground. Luoning wanted his first promise to become silver in their hands instead of tomorrow's rumor. A lord who delayed small wages taught soldiers to doubt larger promises. Then hoofbeats entered the field before the celebration could settle. Knight Garmin Stott rode in with several cavalrymen escorting 5 prisoners on foot. The surviving traitors from yesterday were dragged before the same men preparing to serve Luoning. Nobody needed a speech to identify why ropes bound their wrists. Garmin introduced himself as captain of a squad within Wushan Territory's first knights. Then he explained the prisoners' crime so every recruit could hear it clearly. They had been assigned to protect Baron Luoning. Those prisoners had raised swords against their lord for money on an isolated road. Garmin drew his sword after describing the betrayal. For one long moment, the 5 prisoners stared across the field at men wearing the same guard uniforms. Yesterday, they had complained about Shanlin beside those same barracks walls. Yesterday, one greedy conversation had made murder sound like an escape plan. Now rope burned their wrists while trained knights stood behind them. One prisoner started begging before the order arrived. Another looked toward Luoning as though temporary mercy on the road had promised permanent survival. Luoning gave him nothing back except a steady stare. Logistics had spared them for one afternoon. Wushan law had no logistical reason to spare them now. Garmin lowered his blade and gave the execution order. 5 squire knights moved almost together behind the kneeling prisoners. Steel fell once across the training field. 5 bodies collapsed while 5 severed heads rolled across trampled dirt. The silver coins inside the new guard's hands suddenly felt much heavier. Garmin told them service to a noble was honor, responsibility, and a contract nobody survived breaking twice. He also warned that Wushan would hunt traitors even if Luoning himself showed mercy. The message required no repetition after blood reached the edge of the formation. Rulans had turned execution into orientation for the replacement guards. Luoning disliked the sight more than his face revealed. He also understood exactly why an old frontier ruler had chosen to make the punishment public. Fear could stop betrayal, but fear alone couldn't build the army Luo Ning wanted. So after Garmin departed, Luo Ning gave McKen responsibility for training the new guards. McKen admitted that killing enemies and building a disciplined unit required very different experience. Luo Ning had no military career to contribute either. What he did have was one painfully ordinary memory from university on Earth. Military training had once felt like pointless sweating beneath an instructor who enjoyed shouting before breakfast. Now formation, marching, posture, and immediate response looked surprisingly valuable inside an undisciplined medieval guard unit. System rewards could accelerate supernatural strength almost instantly. Luo Ning would have to build discipline with repetition, food, consequences, and time. He told McKen they would start with the simplest movements tomorrow. The knight accepted as seriously as though Luo Ning had handed him an ancient combat manual. That night, the system delivered something far more magical than marching practice. The third login reward appeared after midnight as a delicate blue-green ring. A note explained that battle aura or mental power could bind the storage artifact. Luo Ning still couldn't project battle aura outside his body. So he closed his eyes and pushed mental power toward the ring instead. At first, he felt only cold metal around one finger. Then something inside his mind stretched outward like an invisible hand searching for the object. At last, the ring answered his mental touch. A dark inner space opened beyond ordinary sight, wide enough to hold roughly 10 cubic meters. Luo Ning tested it with clothes, books, coins, and smaller supplies until the process became natural. Each transfer consumed mental effort, but nothing inside added weight to his body afterward. Then the ring itself sank invisibly beneath the skin around his finger. For one long moment, Luo Ning flexed his hand and stared at absolutely nothing. Wiggins had sent him north with 11 wagons because the family believed transport capacity limited him. The system had just given Luo Ning a hidden room that traveled wherever his hand went. What would his father say if every future shortage kept disappearing into tools Wiggins didn't know existed? Luo Ning slept smiling for the first time since waking inside the scandal. By morning, the second departure looked nothing like the first. 2 warhorses stood beside 11 loaded wagons and 30 newly selected guards. McKen rode the better black horse while Chahar checked ropes, grain sacks, cookware, and every loose wheel. Most came again on Roland's behalf to wish the young Baron a safe journey. Hallward brought another formal farewell from Diane. Wiggins remained far enough away that nobody had to manufacture tenderness for the occasion. Luo Ning did not mind his father staying absent. Every extra mile between himself and his father felt increasingly profitable. The convoy left Wushan Fortress for the second time under the same road and a completely different balance of power. This time, nobody inside the guard ranks planned to murder him before lunch. Luo Ning still refused to treat that as sufficient preparation. The road north became a moving training ground from the first long rest. 30 guards assembled into 6 rows and 5 columns, instead of collapsing around the cooking fires. Luo Ning showed them how to stand at attention with feet aligned and bodies upright. He corrected shoulders, knees spacing, and the strange instinct several men had to turn whenever someone behind them coughed. One young guard slouched badly enough that Luo Ning stopped in front of him. "Who are you trying to impress with that bent spine?" Luo Ning asked, before correcting the posture himself. Several friends laughed until Luo Ning promised the next person laughing would lose dinner. Facial discipline improved with remarkable speed after that announcement. McKen learned the movements first, then walked the rows correcting mistakes while Luo Ning watched the whole formation. Attention became rest. Rest became turns. Turns became short marching sequences across the roadside clearing. The exercises looked absurd beside swords and horses. They also taught 30 separate men to move after one command instead of 30 private opinions. Could something that simple decide who survived once arrows started falling? Luo Ning suspected the answer would become expensive someday. He also ordered every drinking water container filled only after the water had been boiled and cooled. Char didn't ask why clean-looking stream water required another step. He simply reorganized the cooking duties until the order became routine. That obedience made Luo Ning trust him with more work every day. After training ended, Luo Ning and McKen reversed their roles. McKen placed a practice sword in Luo Ning's hands and started teaching basic cuts, guards, footwork, and distance. System points had strengthened Luo Ning's body without giving him the instincts earned through thousands of exchanges. The first session punished that difference immediately. His grip tightened at the wrong moments, his feet crossed, and McKen touched his ribs repeatedly with controlled strikes. Luo Ning kept practicing until both shoulders burned. A lord with hidden power still needed to know what to do when somebody actually attacked him. At night, Chahar watched the guards drilling around camp and asked whether servants could train too. Luo Ning allowed it with a smile. He quietly wondered whether Chahar would remain enthusiastic after the exercises stopped feeling interesting. Near midnight, the 4th Logan Award arrived. The premium package granted 60 attribute points and 100 energy essence at once. Luo Ning could improve himself dramatically, but his dual cultivation physique imposed one irritating rule. Knight and mage advancement had to remain balanced when crossing major thresholds. McCann carried no restriction preventing his own immediate advancement. Before Luo Ning could finish planning the new resources, branches cracked beyond the campfire light. 3 enormous wild boars stepped from the forest with bodies almost as large as young calves. The nearest guards woke grabbing swords while horses pulled nervously against their lines. The animals had smelled grain, vegetables, and everything else humans had packed into wagons. One boar lowered its head and charged before the formation finished assembling. Luo Ning spent the remaining energy needed to push McCann across his first breakthrough. Earth-colored battle aura surged from the knight's heart and flooded through his body. McCann stared once at his own hands before training replaced surprise. He stepped forward alone as the boar thundered toward camp. Then fighting spirit finally left McCann's sword as projected force. A projected aura slash crossed several meters and smashed into the animal's head. The boar collapsed hard enough to throw dirt across the nearest guard's boots. The other 2 stopped, squealed, and disappeared back into darkness before anyone tried playing hero. Cheers followed across the camp once the immediate danger vanished. Every castle guard recognized what projected battle aura meant. McCann had crossed the threshold and become an intermediate knight. One young soldier immediately remembered that McCann had introduced himself as a junior knight that morning. Luo Ning answered before anyone could build a more dangerous theory. McCann trained seriously, Luo Ning said, and tonight his effort finally crossed the threshold. He never claimed marching drills created supernatural advancement. He also never discouraged the guards from making that flattering connection themselves. What if discipline really could carry one of them toward becoming a knight someday? Morning practice became much easier to motivate after that rumor spread through camp. The dead boar became extra meat and richer soup instead of another roadside problem. One midnight attack had produced food, morale, and a public demonstration of their commander's strength. Luo Ning was starting to appreciate how often danger arrived carrying usable inventory. After breakfast, he questioned McCann about the new techniques unlocked by intermediate battle aura. Knights could shape fighting spirit through combat skills, releasing force more efficiently than raw swings allowed. Mages followed a completely different structure, using mental power and refined elemental magic to construct spell patterns. Luo Ning possessed superior wind and fire affinity but almost no practical instruction for using either one. He had become a mage through points without ever learning the grammar of magic. That weakness would have been embarrassing inside an academy. On the northern road, it was about to become dangerous. McCann suddenly raised one hand while the convoy rounded a wooded slope. Metal rang somewhere ahead, faint but regular enough to distinguish from wagons or logging. Someone was fighting on the road beyond the next rise. Luo Ning ordered the convoy stopped and took McCann forward to investigate. What waited beyond that hill would become his first real lesson in magic. Beyond the rise, 3 armored fighters were trading blows beside a damaged carriage and 2 terrified young nobles. One wounded knight wore the blue lake emblem of the Green family and fought while bleeding through his armor. 2 attackers pressed him from opposite sides, forcing him backward toward the carriage with every exchange. A 4th enemy stood farther away in traveling robes, fingers moving through a pattern Luo Ning couldn't recognize. Compressed wind gathered visibly around that distant mage's raised hand. The air snapped, and a pale blade of compressed force crossed the road toward the wounded defender. McCann moved before Luo Ning finished identifying the spell. His shield intercepted the wind blade with battle aura reinforcing the metal beneath it. The impact scraped him backward several steps and announced their arrival to everyone fighting. The mage looked toward Luo Ning, saw silver hair and Wushan features, then cursed the interruption. The young man beside the carriage shouted that assassins were trying to kill his sister. Luo Ning had no reason to join every roadside conflict in Wushan territory. He had several reasons to join one involving noble blood, hired killers, and a mage carrying exactly the knowledge he lacked. McCann entered the melee without waiting for another invitation. His intermediate strength changed the balance before the attackers adjusted to a 4th combatant. One enemy knight tried circling behind him and met the edge of McCann's shield instead. The second traded blades twice before earth-colored aura smashed through his guard and sent him across the road. The wounded Green Knight recovered enough space to protect the siblings instead of merely surviving. Then the enemy mage retreated into the trees. Luo Ning followed the retreating mage straight into the trees. The robed men expected another helpless noble and found Luo Ning moving with novice knight speed. A second wind blade formed between the mage's fingers. Luo Ning changed direction before the spell completed, letting the attack tear bark from the tree behind him. The mage's eyes widened after watching his target evade something ordinary nobles shouldn't even perceive in time. Luo Ning closed the gap with his sword raised. The mage abandoned elegance and threw loose wind pressure toward Luo Ning's chest. The blast staggered him without breaking bone. Then Luo Ning drove forward again while the caster tried building another complete spell pattern. Steel opened the mage's shoulder before the final node connected. Pain disrupted concentration, and the unfinished spell dissolved into harmless air. Luo Ning struck the man's wrist, kicked behind one knee, and put him on the ground. For one long moment, the mage stared upward at the disgraced Wushan grandson everyone described as useless. The rumor had been accurate only days earlier. That made the mage's confusion almost reasonable. McKen arrived soon afterward with blood on his sword and no serious wound on his body. The other attackers had been killed or disabled before the Green Knight could lose any more ground. A roadside ambush had become prisoners before Luo Ning's convoy even finished coming over the hill. The rescued young man introduced himself as Mullick Green from Lake Town. The young woman beside him was his sister Marina Green. Their protector Kane had held the attackers back after the ambush cut their small escort apart. Luo Ning gave the injured siblings his carriage and ordered Chahar to treat every wound that could be cleaned. Kane thanked him with the desperate sincerity of a knight who had expected to die beside his employers. Luo Ning accepted the gratitude while watching the captured mage far more closely than politeness required. Money mattered on every road leading farther north toward Shanlin. A living mage with information mattered more than whatever coins his pockets happened to contain. The prisoner gave his name as Pedro after McKen made silence physically uncomfortable. He belonged to an organization called the Skull and Bonus Society. Kane recognized the name and compared it with other violent groups spreading through Wushan territory. The Black Gold Brotherhood and Portland Thieves had also appeared around similar periods. Too many armed organizations were growing while rulings weakened and local nobles tested the edges of control. Luo Ning had left one political vortex only to discover the whole territory contained smaller versions. For now, Pedro offered a more immediate opportunity. Luo Ning told the prisoner that useful answers could purchase a less painful ending. Pedro laughed at the idea that a man famous for magical incompetence could understand anything he explained. That insult accidentally gave Luo Ning exactly the opening he wanted. Then teach me, Luo Ning said, and prove how little I know before the road continues. Pedro explained because pride was easier than silence while McKen stood nearby holding a bloody sword. Magic began with mental power controlling refined elemental energy inside the caster. To release a spell, the mage constructed a complete magical pattern through ordered nodes and connections. Every node had to receive the right amount of power before the structure became stable. Miss one connection and the spell collapsed. Push too much power through one section and the pattern could fail before release. Luo Ning listened with the concentration of a designer studying code someone else had already debugged. Spell scrolls stored completed structures in advance. A user activated the prepared pattern instead of drawing every node under battlefield pressure. That convenience made good scrolls valuable to warriors who couldn't cast magic themselves. Creating one required treated beast hide, special ink, magical materials, and enough control to reproduce the pattern perfectly. The ink could include processed beast blood or essence mixed with powdered magical material. Magic crystals provided another highly valuable source of concentrated energy for scroll work and other applications. Pedro grew less arrogant as Luo Ning's questions became more specific. The supposed magical idiot was asking where patterns failed, how nodes interacted, and why scroll construction demanded stable output. Pedro finally asked why Luo Ning cared so much if he couldn't cast anything himself. Luo Ning answered by extending mental power toward the prisoner's explanation and testing the simplest structure he could remember. Nothing happened during Luo Ning's first attempt at the pattern. That failure pleased him more than Pedro expected because the process itself now made sense. Information had turned an invisible wall into a sequence of mistakes he could correct. Pedro continued explaining until pain and exhaustion made every answer slower. Eventually, the prisoner asked for a quick death rather than another round of questioning. Luo Ning had briefly considered recruiting Pedro instead of killing him. A trained mage was rare enough that killing one felt like burning gold. But Pedro had accepted money to murder strangers and now knew Luo Ning possessed hidden supernatural strength. Releasing him meant purchasing a future assassination with temporary mercy. Controlling him required trust Luo Ning did not possess and leverage he couldn't maintain on the road. So Luo Ning thanked Pedro for becoming his first magic instructor. Then he killed him cleanly with one stroke. The system responded before the body stopped moving. The next King of Slaughter stage registered a level 1 supernatural kill and released another package of attribute points and energy essence. A mage had spent years learning patterns, surviving dangerous work, and selling lethal skill to employers. To Pedro, that career had ended beside a road. To Luo Ning's system, it had become another progress bar filling on schedule. The contrast bothered him more than the reward pleased him. And then Chahar started inventorying the dead. Pedro carried several parchments, a fine quill, 3 small crystal bottles coins, and a thumb-sized purple crystal. The 2 defeated knights contributed more coins and 2 serviceable armor sets. Luoning estimated those suits alone represented roughly 60 gold coins in equipment value. McKen received the better fitting set while the second went into storage. Pedro's coins combined with the other attackers' money into several gold and many silver pieces. Kane watched the collection with the expression of a man too grateful to argue over dead assassin's property. Luoning inspected the purple crystal more carefully. Its color, density, and faint internal energy matched every description he had heard of a magic crystal. If that identification was correct, 1/6 of his first recharge requirement had just tried killing Malik Green. The 3 bottles likely contained processed magical beast material used in scroll construction. 4 parchments carried spell diagrams and notes dense enough that Pedro's lessons suddenly had textbooks. An assassination attempt had become armor, coin, magical materials, instruction, and 1 piece of a premium system purchase. Danger was developing an increasingly suspicious habit of paying Luoning after losing. That evening, their roadside camp became Luoning's first real magic classroom. Luoning copied the simplest wind pattern from Pedro's notes and tried building it through mental power. The first attempt collapsed before half the nodes connected. The second lasted longer and failed when his magical output surged too strongly through one section. The fifth produced nothing except a headache. Marina watched from near the fire while Kane changed her bandages. She asked whether Barren Firestorm had secretly studied magic before today. Luoning answered that secretly would be generous when most of his previous studying involved avoiding useful lessons. The self-mockery earned a small laugh after an afternoon filled with blood. Then Luoning tried constructing the spell pattern one more time. This time the invisible pattern held together for 1 heartbeat longer. Wind stirred around his palm and lifted dust from the road. The next attempt produced a brief controlled breeze strong enough to move loose cloth around the camp. Marina grabbed her skirt before the gust became embarrassing and glared at Luoning from across the fire. He immediately pointed at the spell diagram as though parchment had personally chosen the direction. McKen looked away because loyal knights were apparently allowed to avoid laughing at their lord. The failed mage of Wushan had cast his first intentional spell on the same day he learned how spell patterns worked. Nobody in the convoy understood how impossible that learning speed should have been. Luoning intended to keep it that way. The 5th Logan reward arrived soon afterward as the flowing flame sword. Its blade carried magical patterns and a quality far beyond the cheap weapons held by ordinary guards. Wind and fire battle aura could eventually activate scorching effects built into the weapon. Luoning currently lacked the strength and control to use its full ability safely. So the sword disappeared into his spatial ring before curious eyes could study it for too long. The 6th Logan reward delivered a magical beast contract scroll. If a magical beast accepted the bond, the scroll could establish a master-servant relationship strong enough to control future cooperation. That sounded priceless in a territory bordered by monster mountains. It also sounded useless until Luoning found a magical beast willing to stop trying to eat him long enough to sign anything. The 7th Login Day finally arrived as the convoy approached Lake Town. Light formed beyond a private section of forest while Luoning claimed the final newcomer reward. A slender man emerged from the summoning formation wearing mage robes marked by pale patterns. Elrenfal bowed and recognized Luoning as his lord with the same absolute certainty McKen had shown. His system panel revealed light affinity and potential reaching the archmage level. Luoning had wanted another loyal subordinate from the system. The system had given him something rarer than another sword. He had a professional mage capable of teaching magic properly. More importantly, light magic carried healing abilities almost non-existent among ordinary frontier physicians. Luoning invested energy essence into Elren until the mage crossed into intermediate strength. The breakthrough restored more magical knowledge inside Elren's fragmented memory. He raised one hand and formed a soft healing spell over a shallow cut Luoning had made for the test. Warm light covered the shallow wound across Luoning's skin. The bleeding stopped before Luoning finished staring at it. Skin drew together where steel had opened it moments earlier. For one long moment, McKen studied the healed cut with more surprise than he had shown during his own summoning. A sword could stop enemies before they reached Luoning. Elrond could repair whatever happened when the sword failed. What was one healer worth in a territory where infections could kill people after surviving battle? More than any early scroll prophet Luoning could calculate comfortably. By then, the Green siblings had recovered enough to guide the convoy toward Lake Town before their routes separated. Lake Town spread around freshwater lakes feeding fishing, small farms, and trade along several useful roads. Its fortress belonged to Baron German Green, a one-armed bronze knight with enough history to remain cautious around greater families. German didn't personally appear when Luoning arrived. Madame Flavia Lori received the convoy instead and thanked Luo Ning for saving Malik and Marina. The hospitality was warm enough that the Baron's absence felt deliberate rather than insulting. Then the Green family started bringing gifts. Grain arrived first because every frontier lord understood what food meant on a long road. Additional horses followed the grain into Luo Ning's growing convoy. Finally, Flavia presented 200 gold coins as formal gratitude for saving both siblings. Luo Ning had expected dinner and perhaps a useful letter of friendship. One roadside intervention had become an investment package large enough to fund months of territorial work. He asked that part of the payment be exchanged into copper and silver before departure. Shanlin's tiny economy might see a gold coin as treasure and still struggle to make change for bread. That practical request improved Flavia's opinion more than another elegant thank you could have managed. Elsewhere inside the fortress, German was making the political calculation Luo Ning had expected. Britain's inheritance tied the Hyde family closer to Wushan's future. Openly embracing the discarded elder grandson could create unnecessary tension with people Lake Town still needed. So Green gratitude would remain generous without becoming an alliance anyone could display at court. Luo Ning recognized the distance and refused to resent it. The family had paid its debt fairly and treated his people well. He needed reliable neighbors more than dramatic declarations of brotherhood. When the convoy left Lake Town, it carried more food, more horses, more money, and a useful relationship. Then one of Luo Ning's youngest guards developed a feverish pain near his chest during morning training. McCann examined the young guard while expecting an ordinary training injury. A weak seed of fighting spirit had finally formed inside the young guard. David had awakened naturally after repeated drills, marching, meals, rest, and several exhausting days on the road. Luo Ning hadn't spent 1 point of energy essence on it. That mattered more than the immediate increase in combat power. System summons could grow through ordinary cultivation after arriving. Local people could also awaken and improve without the system creating them first. Shanlin's future army didn't need to consist entirely of impossible rewards. It needed training, talent, food, time, and enough opportunity for ordinary people to become extraordinary. Luo Ning promoted David within the small guard structure and told McCann to watch his progress carefully. The other young guards trained even harder after seeing someone from their own ranks awaken. McCann's earlier breakthrough had remained mysterious to the ordinary guards. David's breakthrough was personal, visible, and impossible to dismiss as something only summoned monsters could achieve. By the time Lake Town disappeared behind the hills, 30 guards were marching with different eyes. They were no longer only following wages toward a dangerous town. Some had started following the possibility that Shanlin might change what they could become. And somewhere beyond the mountains, the official already ruling Shanlin had no idea what kind of convoy was approaching him. The road toward Shanlin narrowed after Muma City's trade routes fell behind them. Forests pressed closer while hills broke sightlines into short, dangerous sections. Swamptown lay south under Barren Raisin Sane, one of the nearest nobles to Luo Ning's new territory. That geography made Raisin either a useful neighbor or the first person capable of strangling Shanlin's road access. Luo Ning preferred discovering which version he faced before winter made alternatives worse. He ordered McCann, Elrond, and David to watch every ridge during the final approach. The caution paid for itself before the next meal ended. Elrond paused beside the road and said several groups were moving toward them from beyond the slope. Luo Ning ordered the guards assembled before strangers appeared. 30 men formed ranks much faster than they had during the first training day. Soon mounted figures crossed the rise and entered full view. 4 cavalrymen led roughly 20 infantrymen and several archers toward Luo Ning's waiting convoy. Their commander introduced himself as Princet, the political officer who had managed Shanlin Town for years. He also called himself Shanlin's protector with enough confidence to make the title sound self-appointed. Luo Ning remained mounted and asked why a political officer needed armed men to welcome his lawful baron. Princet answered with a smile polished by years without anyone stronger questioning him. No resident lord had governed Shanlin directly for almost a decade. Taxes still traveled south while day-to-day authority accumulated around whoever controlled the fortress, records, and armed men locally. Princet had occupied that empty space long enough to mistake stewardship for ownership. Luo Ning had predicted exactly this danger after the first guards betrayed him. A servant left unwatched long enough could begin treating the master's property like his own house. Princet had enjoyed 9 years to practice the habit. For one long moment, both groups remained separated by a road too narrow for comfortable maneuvering. Luo Ning offered him 1 clean exit. Dismount, acknowledge the new lord, keep serving Shanlin, and let old arrangements die without another investigation. Loyal work could even become a future path toward legitimate advancement. Princet laughed because his information about Luo Ning belonged to the man who existed before the system awakened. He had been told the former heir was weak, ordinary, disinherited, and protected by barely any supernatural strength. A magical beast attack on a remote road could erase that problem without creating proof against anyone. Princet asked why Luo Ning couldn't simply return south and enjoy whatever money remained from the family settlement. That question ended the peaceful option more completely than a formal refusal. Luo Ning repeated the order loudly enough for every soldier behind Princet to hear it. Submit to Shanlin's lawful Barren now, or choose open rebellion beside a man protecting stolen authority. Some infantrymen shifted after hearing the choice stated that plainly. Princet noticed and drew his sword before hesitation could spread. Battle aura surged around the political officer as his cavalry started forward. McCann moved first and drove his warhorse straight toward Princet. His warhorse covered the narrow distance, while Luo Ning's guards advanced behind him in a formation drilled across 10 days of travel. The same marching exercises that looked ridiculous beside campfires now kept 30 men from scattering under pressure. Princet met McCann head-on and discovered the supposed junior knight carried intermediate battle aura and disciplined instincts. Their swords crashed once, then again, shaking both horses beneath them. Princet kicked free of the saddle and tried using the infantry line as cover for another angle. McCann followed without allowing him space to reorganize. Meanwhile, two of Princet's supernatural companions moved toward Luo Ning instead. One expected the weak young noble described in every recent rumor. Luo Ning met him with novice battle aura and a sword moving much faster than expected. The first clash widened the attacker's eyes. That second exchange forced the supernatural attacker another step backward. Elrin released light support from behind the guard line while David stayed close enough to reinforce any break. Princet's archers loosed arrows, but Luo Ning's formation tightened instead of collapsing into separate duels. Shields rose. Men crouched. McCann's orders moved through the line faster than panic. Several arrows struck wood or earth without stopping the advance. One guard took a shaft through the upper arm and kept his place until the next command moved him back. Elrin reached him seconds later and stabilized the wound with healing magic. That sight did more for morale than another speech ever could. The men beside him had just watched injury become survivable while the formation still held. Princet's infantry had no equivalent advantage supporting their wounded fighters. Their line broke after McCann smashed their commander to the ground and Luo Ning defeated the nearest supernatural attacker. Another of Princet's fighters tried fleeing uphill. David and 3 guards intercepted him before the trees could hide the retreat. Within minutes, what had begun as an armed rejection of authority became prisoners kneeling beside their own abandoned weapons. The battle was one-sided enough that Luo Ning almost felt insulted by how confidently Princet had planned his death. Then he remembered confidence built from bad information was one of the most useful resources an enemy could provide. Princet lay wounded, staring at Luo Ning as though the road had changed beneath him. Luo Ning asked who had promised that killing the new Baron would remain politically safe. Princet refused until McCann made clear that silence would not improve the next hour. A captured junior knight named Malta broke first. He admitted that Shanlin's old administration had been connected to Baron Raisin for years. Taxes, trade favors, road access and local appointments had gradually tied Princet closer to Swamp Town than Wushan Fortress. Reports about Shanlin's dangers had also been exaggerated whenever exaggeration discouraged outside attention. Savage tribes genuinely existed beyond the settled parts of Shanlin. Magical beasts were equally real inside the neighboring mountain ranges. Neither threat explained why Princet had spent years treating a public fortress like private inheritance. Princet's other allies included several local supernatural fighters whose loyalties followed payment instead of law. Luo Ning asked how much strength Raisin could bring if Swamp Town moved openly. Malta described a force far beyond Shanlin's current ability to fight comfortably. Raisin himself stood near the peak of high-ranking knight strength. Ferrodin Henry, one of his trusted men, was another dangerous professional fighter with influence over regional business. Swamp Town also possessed more trained soldiers and supernaturals than Luo Ning's small convoy could match in a direct battle. Winning against Princet had solved the gate. It had not solved the neighbor behind him. Then scouts reported another mounted group approaching from the south. Malta went pale before anyone named the likely commander. Ferrodin was coming with another armed group from the south. What happened if Raisin's backup arrived and found Princet alive enough to explain every weakness in Luo Ning's force? Luo Ning needed the next battlefield to exist mostly inside Ferrodin's imagination. He ordered wounded prisoners separated and placed Malta where cooperation could become survival. Several captured men still tied directly to the assassination plan refused every offer to cooperate. Keeping them alive risked exposing the bluff before it started. Luo Ning made the colder decision before Ferrodin could arrive. The most dangerous prisoners were executed, while selected survivors were positioned to support a story about overwhelming resistance and disastrous defeat. Blood from the real battle already covered enough ground to make the lie believable. McCann changed armor placement and remained deliberately distant when the newcomers appeared. Luoning wanted Ferredin to see a battlefield first and calculate strength second. Ferredin's riders arrived slowly, surveying bodies, prisoners, damaged equipment, and a lord who looked far calmer than expected. He claimed he had been hunting nearby and came after hearing sounds of combat. Luoning accepted the transparent excuse with equal politeness. Malta described Princett's defeat without revealing how narrow Shanlin's true supernatural roster remained. He emphasized McCann's speed and crushing force until Ferredin had to decide whether the knight was hiding a higher level. Luoning never corrected Ferredin's impression about McCann's possible strength. A false meteor knight would have been too ridiculous. A stronger than expected professional guard required only uncertainty, and uncertainty was already standing everywhere Ferredin looked. For one long moment, Ferredin studied McCann while McCann gave him absolutely nothing useful to measure. Luoning asked whether Baron Raisin had sent any formal welcome for Shanlin's new lord. Ferredin answered that neighboring nobles had been busy and probably hadn't received complete news yet. The insult was hidden beneath enough courtesy that both men could leave it untouched. Then Ferredin withdrew rather than test a situation his original plan had obviously misunderstood. One successful bluff had purchased Shanlin a little more time. Now Luoning needed to turn that time into real strength before Raisin updated his information. The convoy moved forward again after securing weapons and every useful prisoner. Residents started appearing beside fields before Mountain Fortress came fully into view. They watched silver-haired Luoning arrive behind guards carrying fresh battle marks and surrendered local fighters. Rumors traveled faster than wagons through small settlements. By the time the convoy reached the first dense cluster of houses, everyone already knew Princett had lost. Some villagers looked frightened enough to keep their distance. Others looked curious enough to forget pretending they had work elsewhere. Luoning stopped where enough people could hear him without forcing a formal gathering yet. He named Rulands as his grandfather, Wushan territory as his origin, and Shanlin as his lawful barony. From this day forward, Luoning said, Shanlin had a resident lord again. That public declaration did not produce instant devotion from Shanlin. What it produced first was something more immediately useful. People finally knew which authority had survived the argument outside town. Luoning entered Mountain Fortress and immediately ordered remaining staff detained until records and property could be checked. Tom, one of the local fighters who surrendered early, helped identify people closely tied to Princett. 15 servants and staff eventually waited for judgment inside the fortress courtyard. Several of those servants worked kitchens or performed general labor. One steward had handled most ordinary household matters under Princett. 2 women had served primarily as Princett's lovers while drawing food and privileges from castle stores. Chahar watched Luoning carefully because the old Luoning's reputation around women remained impossible to erase overnight. The new Luoning disappointed every expectation connected to that reputation. Useful servants without serious crimes kept their jobs under new rules. The 2 lovers lost castle positions but weren't expelled from Shanlin itself. Princett's personal dependents could return to ordinary life, unless later evidence tied them to theft or murder. Luoning didn't need new enemies simply because people had lived under the previous administrator. He needed control of doors, ledgers, grain, weapons, money, and information before resentment multiplied. The fortress stores revealed why Princett had resisted surrendering the position. Several rooms inside the fortress were already filled with barley. Beer, weapons, household goods, spare tools, books, and tax records occupied other spaces. Some supplies would feed Luoning's guards immediately. Some could support projects Princett never intended to fund. Some had almost certainly been extracted from the same residents watching the new lord from outside the walls. Princett's defeat wasn't merely one dead political official. It was a functioning fortress, accumulated inventory, local records, and years of resources already paid for by Shanlin. Chahar received authority to recruit replacement staff under clear wages, rather than inherited personal favors. Luoning promised raises when work expanded and demanded discipline in return. To Luoning, predictable wages sounded painfully ordinary and practical. To servants accustomed to arbitrary household treatment, predictability itself looked like generosity. Tom and David were sent across nearby settlements to announce a public meeting for the following morning. Luoning wanted residents to see the man behind the road battle before fear turned into whatever rumor Princett's survivors preferred. Meanwhile, he sent a message toward Lake Town requesting help forwarding news south if Raisin became aggressive. A borrowed messenger bird could reach Wushan channels faster than a rider crossing the entire road network. Luoning also allowed rumors about McCann's strength to remain deliberately vague. A false reputation could become a temporary wall, while the real territory remained weak. How long would that wall survive once Raisin tested it properly? Probably not long enough for Luoning's comfort. Raisin received the first report before Shanlin's residents gathered for their public meeting. His original plan had failed, but the neighboring Barren did not immediately mobilize troops north. Olsen Hyde's approaching 70th birthday demanded political attention across the region. An open attack against Rulance's grandson could also create consequences far larger than one remote town was worth. Raisin chose negotiation before risking a larger political escalation. Ferredin rode back toward Shanlin carrying money and instructions to cool the conflict privately. The next morning, Luo Ning gathered residents on a broad western pasture outside the fortress. Families arrived slowly, carrying children, tools, and the cautious expressions of people who had survived too many changing authorities. Elrond stood beside one wounded guard before Luo Ning began speaking. Healing light gathered around Elrond's hands before the waiting residents. The guard's remaining road injury visibly closed, while hundreds of residents watched from only a few steps away. People who had never stood near a professional mage saw torn flesh tighten under golden white light. Several mothers pulled their children closer while watching the spell. Nearby old farmers leaned forward despite trying to remain cautious. One wounded veteran touched his own scar without seeming to notice the gesture. Then Luo Ning addressed the gathered crowd across the western pasture. He didn't promise everyone wealth before harvest. He didn't claim monsters would vanish because a noble had arrived. He promised that the fortress would govern again, rules would apply openly, and Shanlin would no longer exist as somebody else's forgotten tax pocket. For several seconds, nobody in the pasture answered Luo Ning. Then one voice repeated Luo Ning's name from somewhere near the front. Another voice joined from farther back among the gathered families. The sound spread unevenly until the pasture found one rhythm. Long live Lord Luo Ning rolled across Shanlin for the first time. The same people who had watched his armed arrival yesterday were now choosing to shout his name. That first cheer did not make Shanlin permanently loyal. It gave Luo Ning the first public credit he could spend before earning something stronger. And then Chahar approached with news that Ferredin Henry was waiting outside Mountain Fortress carrying Baron Raisin's apology. An enemy who had helped arrange Luo Ning's death was ready to negotiate the price of peace. Ferredin entered Mountain Fortress expecting the same disgraced young noble Swamptown had planned to erase quietly. A servant made him wait for permission before crossing the inner door. That tiny delay irritated a man who had previously walked through Princett's fortress like another owner's representative. Yesterday, sane influence had opened these rooms without asking Shanlin anything. Today, Ferredin needed Luo Ning's permission to sit down. Power had changed addresses inside the same stone walls. Luo Ning received him without pretending the reason for the visit remained mysterious. Ferredin offered regret for recent misunderstandings and described Princett's actions as an unfortunate excess beyond anyone's intention. Luo Ning asked whether attempted murder had become a misunderstanding simply because the victim survived. Ferredin moved toward compensation instead of answering that question directly. Baron Raisin could offer 200 gold coins to close old grievances and stabilize relations. Luo Ning treated the number like somebody had accidentally left the rest of the payment outside. Ferredin raised it to 300 with visible reluctance. Luo Ning still refused to move toward Ferredin's offered number. Years of diverted influence, manipulated reports, armed retainers, and an assassination attempt were sitting inside the same room. 300 gold barely priced the insult, much less the future risk. So Luo Ning opened at 1,000 gold coins. Ferredin's expression made the demand sound closer to war than compensation. Luo Ning offered livestock as an alternative if Swamptown lacked enough liquid coin. Black water buffalo were valuable for farming, breeding, transport, and every expansion Shanlin intended to attempt. 30 or 40 animals sounded perfectly reasonable to the person not paying for them. Ferredin nearly ended the meeting before remembering Raisin's explicit order to cool the conflict. For one long moment, both men stopped discussing justice and started measuring the price of peace. Luo Ning held evidence capable of embarrassing Raisin before Wushan Fortress. Raisin held enough military strength to crush Shanlin if politics ever stopped restraining him. Neither side wanted the worst version of the other advantage tested today. The final agreement settled far below Luo Ning's opening demand and far above Raisin's preferred loss. Swamptown would pay 608 gold coins. It would also deliver 3 male black buffalo and 10 female black buffalo. Ferredin advanced 8 gold from his own funds to close the final number cleanly. A failed attempt to control Shanlin had become more than 600 gold and 13 breeding animals. Princett had spent years feeding Sane's influence. His defeat was now financing the lord he had tried to kill. And then the system reacted to the payment. Receiving more than 500 gold at once completed Luo Ning's prosperous fortune achievement. 20 attribute points and 40 energy essence appeared beside a compensation agreement still wet with ink. One attempted murder had now paid him twice. First came payment in money and valuable breeding livestock. Then came another reward through supernatural system progression. Luo Ning accepted because breathing room mattered more than symbolic outrage while Shanlin remained vulnerable. He still stored Raisin's relationship with Hyde politics as a question worth revisiting later. For now, capital had given the territory options poverty never allowed. It also gave Luo Ning a new problem. Money disappeared much faster once every useful project started demanding part of the same pile. Every guard on Shanlin's payroll needed reliable wages. Servants needed wages, clothing, food, and tools before household work became reliable instead of desperate. Knights and mages cost more than ordinary retainers in equipment, diet, mounts, and training resources. Roads, farms, livestock, workshops, defenses, and population growth all wanted the same gold next. A lord couldn't build a future entirely by surviving assassinations and sending invoices afterward. Shanlin itself needed to start producing durable value from its territory. Chahar began by recruiting roughly 20 new servants for household work, kitchens, livestock care, cleaning, and storage. Galen became one of the more useful male servants almost immediately. Bella entered the inner household and proved quick enough to handle personal service without constant instructions. Bandler took another practical role among the fortress staff. New uniforms and regular meals changed how recruits carried themselves before any formal training began. Chahar treated the hiring process like his first serious test of becoming the steward he had always wanted to be. Luo Ning let him own the responsibility instead of correcting every small decision personally. Then Luo Ning turned toward the harder vacancy inside his new government. Shanlin needed a political officer who could read, reason, obey law, and avoid becoming the next princess. Luo Ning opened applications to free residents and serfs alike, immediately confusing people who expected status to decide the shortlist. Competence would decide who stayed in the room, Luo Ning said. The first candidate praised Luo Ning's wisdom for several minutes before hearing a single actual problem. Luo Ning asked how he would handle two farmers claiming ownership of the same stolen duck. The man proposed punishing whichever farmer looked less respectable and returning the animal to the wealthier household. Chahar lowered his eyes before his face betrayed him. The second candidate wanted both farmers imprisoned until somebody confessed. That solution created two angry families and still didn't identify the owner. A third candidate spent so long flattering Luo Ning that the interview almost became a memorial service for common sense. Then Wilson entered with ink stains on his fingers and very little confidence. He listened to the stolen duck problem twice, before asking who currently possessed the animal, and whether anyone witnessed the theft. Secure the disputed property first, Wilson said, then separate accusation from evidence before deciding ownership or punishment. Chahar finally looked up after hearing one genuinely practical answer. Somebody had answered the problem instead of guessing which person deserved favor. Luo Ning changed the scenario before Wilson could relax. A village chief collects the proper grain tax, then quietly demands extra barley for himself afterward. Wilson said the official records should be checked, witnesses questioned, and the chief removed if private collection was proven. What if that chief had powerful relatives inside Shanlin? Wilson hesitated, then answered that law stopped being law once relatives could purchase exceptions from it. Fear appeared on his face only after he heard his own answer in front of the Lord. Luo Ning appointed him before nerves could improve the response into something worse. Wilson's first assignment sounded painfully unglamorous after winning the most important interview of his life. Count every person living under Shanlin's authority, Luo Ning ordered. Princet had governed Shanlin through convenient estimates for too long. Luo Ning wanted names, ages, households, occupations, legal status, family relationships, and enough detail to plan afterward. While Wilson began the census, Luo Ning inspected the food system supporting every future ambition. Shanlin grew barley and wheat with yields low enough to make population growth dangerous. Farmers used simple plows that disturbed shallow soil, while demanding too much animal or human effort for limited improvement. Luo Ning remembered better ridge cultivation and curved plow structures from earth well enough to start experiments. He refused to announce agricultural revolution before a single local field proved anything. Selected plots would test spacing ridges, water control, and modified plow geometry under recorded conditions. If yields improved, village leaders could spread the method next season using results people had actually seen. What if one practical plow mattered more to Shanlin than another expensive sword? One sword protected a single fighter during one dangerous exchange. A better field could feed the family that produced 10 future fighters. Sanitation entered Luo Ning's list for the same boring reason. Wushan City had shown him what happened when nobody connected filth with governance. He ordered proper waste pits and improved toilet designs around the fortress before a larger settlement made the problem harder. Large ceramic containers and designated disposal areas looked less heroic than fortifications. They also kept waste away from wells, kitchens, crowded paths, and places where flies moved between both. Chahar accepted the orders after asking several practical questions about labor and cleaning schedules. Then a survey west of the fortress revealed something more interesting than toilets. Dense stands of unusually hard dark trees grew across land Prince's records treated as nearly worthless forest. Locals avoided using them whenever ordinary timber was available, because cutting the wood destroyed tools and consumed huge amounts of labor. Luoning asked for several pieces brought back anyway. The material resisted chopping, bending, and impact far better than common wood. An ignored nuisance tree suddenly looked like cheap defensive material waiting for the correct workshop. Shanlin had no convenient iron mine anywhere near its settlements. Full metal armor for common guards would consume a fortune. Luoning preferred spending elsewhere. Black ironwood might become shields, reinforced panels, spear shafts, cart components, or partial armor at much lower cost. Luoning named the material black ironwood before anyone supplied a better term. William, a local carpenter familiar with the trees, was brought to the fortress for consultation. He explained that the wood's strength was real, but cutting and shaping it ruined ordinary blades rapidly. Luoning asked how many workers William could train if the fortress paid steady wages for a specialized shop. The carpenter looked at Char as though expecting somebody to explain the joke. Nobody explained anything, and William finally accepted that the offer was serious. William had spent years waiting for individual customers and repairing whatever richer households brought to his door. Now the Lord was offering apprentices, raw material, predictable pay, and a reason to specialize. The first black ironwood products would equip Shanlin's guards before anything was sold outside. Only surplus production would become trade goods later. William left carrying a sample that had been worthless forest yesterday and paid work today. Several days later, Wilson returned with ledgers thick enough to make the stolen duck interview feel very far away. He reported a population figure that immediately contradicted everything Wushan Fortress believed. Shanlin did not contain fewer than 1,000 residents. Wilson had registered 1,993 people before counting Luoning's own arriving group. For one long moment, Luoning stared at the ledger and asked him to repeat the number. Wilson did, then showed household totals, ages, occupations, villages, and names supporting the count. Prince's reporting had hidden or distorted almost half the population Luoning expected to govern. The census listed 543 households spread across settlements too scattered for fortress orders to reach efficiently. Wilson had even separated working ages and younger residents without needing the categories requested twice. Chahar admitted that the new political officer had earned his appointment faster than anyone expected. Luoning praised Wilson in front of the steward, and the exhausted man's shoulders straightened despite several sleepless nights. Then the census stopped being a stack of names and became a map for administration. Roughly 100 households would form a village-sized unit, with smaller groups organized beneath each one. Village chiefs and group leaders would carry orders outward and return problems through the same chain. They would receive modest payment, because public work treated as unpaid privilege invited private extraction later. A complaint could now travel toward the fortress without depending entirely on rumor or personal access. A tax order could move outward with names attached to every level responsible for carrying it. Not one sword moved while Luoning drew those lines across Wilson's records. Yet Prince's kind of private kingdom had just become harder to rebuild inside Shanlin. The census also transformed Luoning's understanding of Shanlin's farmland. Large flat stretches southeast could eventually provide 40 or 50,000 mu of cultivable land by themselves. Northeastern fields and more than 10,000 mu already lying fallow pushed the total near 80,000. A territory described as barren had enough potential farmland to support tens of thousands if yields improved. What Shanlin actually lacked was not land at all. It was people, draft animals, tools, and methods efficient enough to make all that land useful. Luoning watched farmers reclaim ground mostly through muscle, because cattle remained scarce and privately controlled. Even the available plows were shallow, awkward, and wasteful whenever animals turned at the end of a furrow. His newly acquired black water buffalo offered a partial answer. Combined with existing animals, Shanlin had roughly 24 strong buffalo suitable for organized plowing work. Luoning planned to allocate them by village once Wilson finished dividing the territory. Serfs would receive priority access, while free tenants could pay modest fees below Prince's old rates. Then Luoning drew the curved plow he remembered from Earth and carried the design directly to Carl's the blacksmith. Carl stared at the Lord's diagram with equal parts excitement and terror. A successful tool would bring Carl's a meaningful reward. A failed commission from the new Barren sounded much more dangerous inside the craftsman's imagination. Luoning explained every part he remembered and promised payment for successful prototypes, rather than punishment for honest failure. That promise changed how Carl's held the drawing. Instead of protecting himself from blame, the blacksmith started asking how the new angles should transfer force through the plow. McCann meanwhile proposed watch posts, entrance registration, and rotating patrols covering farmland, orchards, roads, and the fortress. Luoning approved the defense plan and divided responsibilities before leaving Shanlin again. Raisin remained away attending Olsen Hyde's birthday gathering, creating the safest window Luoning might receive for several weeks. So Luoning chose McCann, Elrond, Tom Galen, 4 guards, and a carriage for the purchasing trip to Muma City. The journey gave daily sign-ins enough time to finish another heartwarming reward cycle. 30 more attribute points and additional energy essence arrived while the road rolled beneath them. Luoning continued strengthening McCann and discovered something more important while checking Elrond's panel. The light mage had gained progress through ordinary cultivation, without receiving system energy from Luoning. McCann could do the same, though slower growth had been hidden beneath repeated system upgrades. Summoned followers weren't frozen character cards waiting for their master to press buttons forever. They could train, learn, and climb naturally toward the limits allowed by their aptitude. Then Luoning completed the requirement, keeping his own 2 paths locked together. His novice mage progression finally reached its threshold while his knight path was already prepared. Both supernatural professions advanced together across the same threshold. Battle aura flowed farther through his body while his magical space expanded under stronger mental power. The former useless Heir became an intermediate knight and intermediate mage before most nobles even knew he possessed talent. Publicly, Luoning could still be underestimated. Privately, every quiet week made that mistake more expensive. He spent the remaining road time practicing lightness, wind blade, flame slash, and fire fist bombardment from captured manuals. Intermediate techniques punished careless control much more harshly than gentle breeze. Wind blade failed repeatedly before Luoning could hold the pattern stable through every node. Tom watched his lord combine night training and magic practice, with increasing unease about how wrong Princet's information had been. By the 4th evening, Muma City finally appeared beyond one of the busiest road networks in Wushan territory. The Ironhoof family had controlled the area for generations, turning stability and horse breeding into a thriving trade center. Pastures surrounded the approaches while merchants moved animals, grain, tack, tools, and luxury goods between crowded districts. Luoning immediately separated practical errands from magical business. Tom Galen and guards were sent to compare wrought iron prices and purchase enough material for Shanlin's tools. McCann and Elrond followed Luoning into the larger commercial quarter. The Ironhoof Merchant Guild specialized in horses and related equipment rather than magical supplies. Its staff directed Luoning toward the Silva Magic Energy Merchant Guild on the northwest side of the district. The Silva building looked more like a mage tower than a shop. Bluestone walls carried carved magical patterns while crystal chandeliers illuminated shelves stacked across several floors. Elrond sensed magical fluctuations before they crossed the entrance. A sales manager named Hook recognized Luoning through the Wushan family's black eyes and silver hair. Hook cared much less about inheritance gossip once Luoning mentioned purchasing magic crystals and magical beast hide. Businessmen respected customers, who could pay regardless of which cousin inherited a marquisate later. Hook explained that magic crystal value depended heavily on remaining stored energy. Full purple crystals were worth far more than pale shells nearly drained of power. Magical beast leather was priced by the creature's level and how difficult the material had been to obtain. Luoning then introduced Elrond as a light mage capable of making healing scrolls. Hook immediately changed posture after learning Elrond was a light mage. Light mages were rare, and reliable healing scrolls remained valuable precisely because wounds ignored social class once steel entered flesh. A level 2 healing scroll sold publicly for roughly 20 gold coins through the Silva Guild. Wind blade scrolls sold slightly lower, around 18 gold. If Luoning supplied healing scrolls, Hook could authorize a purchase price near 17 gold each. The Merchant Guild would keep the remaining margin for taxes, rent, handling, and its own profit. Luoning calculated production costs while Hook discussed hide, magical ink, and crystal requirements. What if Elrond's training could become export revenue instead of only personal improvement? Every successful scroll would turn mental discipline into coin Shanlin could spend on food, tools, or people. Luoning bought magical beast leather and enough prepared ink for a meaningful first production run. Then he purchased 5 full purple magic crystals for 500 gold coins. The expense hurt even after compensation and Laketown's reward had filled his reserves. Pedro's captured crystal waited inside the spatial ring. 5 purchased crystals plus 1 stolen from an assassin made the exact 6 required by Luoning's first recharge. He rented a private room inside a tavern before activating anything that could expose the system publicly. 6 purple crystals rested in Luoning's palm while McCann and Elrond watched from across the table. Purple light surrounded the stones when Luoning triggered the first recharge interface. Cracks spread across surfaces worth 600 gold coins. Then every crystal collapsed into glowing dust and vanished from ordinary sight. McCann looked personally offended by the destruction of wealth, until a summoning formation appeared across the floor. The luxury reward delivered 200 attribute points and 400 energy essence at once. Then purple gold light climbed around a new figure carrying a greatsword across his back. Short orange-red hair made the man's head look crowned by flame beneath the magical glow. He had a relaxed confidence McCann and Elrond lacked during their own first moments in the world. The system identified him as Rydell Main, a fire knight with blazing sun aptitude. Even more shocking was Rydell's current supernatural strength. Rydell had arrived already standing at the peak of advanced knight level. Luo Ning stared at the panel until another system rule appeared. A contracted follower could not exceed the master's major cultivation tier by more than the system allowed. Rydell possessed absurd future potential, but his immediate advancement would remain capped until Luo Ning himself crossed higher boundaries. Even restricted, an advanced peak knight changed Shanlin's military position overnight. Faradin's threat already looked smaller from inside the tavern room. Rydell knelt and introduced himself with a title none of them expected. He remembered being commander of something called the Blazing Expeditionary Force. The name meant nothing to Luo Ning's inherited knowledge. Rydell remembered almost nothing else beyond fragments connected to identity, combat, and loyalty. McCann and Elrond both studied him with faint recognition they couldn't explain. What kind of history could connect people the system had supposedly created as rewards? Luo Ning postponed the mystery because 400 energy essence still waited to become strength. Rydell couldn't advance farther under the current restriction. Shanlin needed another high-level fighter more urgently than it needed balanced elegance between every subordinate. So Luo Ning poured most of the energy into McCann. Power surged through the Earth Knight until he reached advanced rank and climbed close to its peak. Then something visibly changed behind McCann's usually controlled expression. He told Luo Ning a memory fragment had returned during the breakthrough. McCann remembered serving as captain of the 7th Knights within the Blazing Expeditionary Force. The room went quiet around a connection nobody had designed consciously. Rydell remembered commanding the same expeditionary force McCann had served. McCann remembered leading one of its knight units beneath the same banner. Had the system summoned fictional helpers, reborn people, or survivors from a history erased beyond Wishan's maps? Elrond admitted he remembered nothing similar yet and asked whether reaching advanced level might repair his own memory. Luo Ning promised Elrond would receive his turn, then invested the remaining energy essence into the mage's growth. The main production assignment was equally clear. Once they returned home, Elrond would practice healing scroll creation until Shanlin could sell reliable batches through Silva's network. Luo Ning also spent his huge attribute reward primarily on magical progression because upcoming scroll work demanded more mental power and mana. His own combat need had fallen slightly now that 2 advanced knights stood beside him. His need to master useful magic had increased. Then Luo Ning asked Rydell which fire combat techniques survived inside his restored knowledge. Rydell described Flame Slash and a wider technique called Fire Clouds that swept destructive force across multiple enemies. Luo Ning handed him the Fire Fist Bombardment manual captured from Prince's side. Rydell read the captured combat manual only once before testing it. Then Red Battle Aura wrapped his fist in controlled flame before Luo Ning had finished lowering the empty hand. McCann stared with the painful respect of a talented fighter watching somebody much more gifted solve a difficult problem instantly. Rydell explained that good manuals mainly shorten trial and error by preserving other knights' successful control methods. Theoretically, a sufficiently skilled knight could create new techniques through experimentation. That answer gave Luo Ning one final idea before returning to Shanlin. Rydell and McCann were separated by only a small amount of current progression, but numbers did not equal combat skill. So Luo Ning asked both men to spar somewhere safe on the road home. Rydell looked toward McCann after hearing the proposed sparring match. McCann looked back with the first openly competitive expression Luo Ning had ever seen on his face. Both men accepted before Elrond could make a joke about ancient comrades settling forgotten rankings. Outside, Muma City's tavern continued roaring with merchants who had no idea what had just appeared upstairs. Inside one rented room, Luo Ning had spent 6 magic crystals and gained a commander from a forgotten expeditionary force. He had also learned that his first summoned knight once served beneath that command. What happened to the Blazing Expeditionary Force before both men lost their histories? Luo Ning didn't have the answer yet. But on the road back to Shanlin, 2 advanced knights were about to let their swords remember before their minds did. For one long moment, the system stopped feeling like a private advantage built only for Luo Ning. It looked like a doorway into a history nobody in Wishan territory had ever recorded. Rydell carried one fragment of that history. McCann carried another fragment beneath the same vanished military banner. Elrond might be holding a third piece behind a memory that had not awakened yet. Luo Ning closed the interface and looked toward the night beyond the tavern window. Shanlin had begun as exile danger, and a title nobody respected. Now it had money, land, loyal followers, growing soldiers, industry plans, and secrets larger than the territory itself. And then Steel shifted softly as Rydell checked the greatsword across his back. McKin answered by resting one hand against his own sword hilt. Tomorrow's road home would begin with two forgotten soldiers testing which memories survived inside their bodies.